joint, the subtalar joint. This joint is kind of like allows the talus to do something like this. So when your foot hits the ground, the outside of your heel bone, the calcaneus, usually hits first, especially if you're wearing shoes, because that's just how that's what comes into contact first. And then what will happen is the whole calcaneus will come down into the ground, which is called eversion. When that happens, it's a perfect angle for the subtalar joint to literally kind of do this. It kind of slides down. And you can actually see, what am I doing here? Well, I'm moving downward, and I'm also kind of going across. So I'm kind of cutting an angle about 40 to 45 degrees, which, by the way, is roughly the average axis of the subtalar joint. And of course, it varies just like anything else, all right? So your foot hits the ground, the heel does this, the subtalar joint does this, and what will happen is the foot will begin to be a little bit more mobile, and that's a good thing. You want to be able to absorb or decelerate forces, so when your foot hits the ground, you don't want to have this solid smack. I think of it akin to jump off a table and land with your knees locked straight. Go for it, all right? So your foot hits the ground, the calcaneus everts, the foot becomes more mobile. So all the joints in the foot get to be able to decelerate pronation. Another thing that happens is your foot will actually also land and go through a dorsiflexion, or go through dorsiflexion, which will start to allow muscles up above it begin to decelerate that. Another thing that will also happen is above this little knee thing. The knee will begin to flex, the hip will flex, the pelvis will tilt. All those things happen at the same time. Those are all components of pronation. Again, don't think of pronation as just a foot thing. Think of pronation as the whole body decelerating each step, because each step is a controlled fall. Okay? So, your foot hits the ground, your heel goes out, the other part of the foot goes in. So your heel goes out in the eversion, your front part of your foot goes up in the inversion. So everything begins to kind of accept this force. And then all of a sudden, what will happen is, right as you're about to push off in a good foot, your foot will begin to go the other direction. And then things start to change a little bit. So once you had a foot that was mobile, will become a foot that is a little more stable. Okay? It doesn't necessarily completely lock up, but it does get tighter in there. The mechanism allows you to push off. Because do you want to push on something mushy or something that's a little more firm? Of course, more firm. Okay? So, some accessory motions that happen when you pronate. And I'm going to take my shoes off. I'm not surprised I have shoes on. Alright? Okay? So, I'm going to pull up my pant leg here. And let's see if you can see my foot there. Alright, see my foot? Now, I'm going to allow my foot to kind of subtalar joint neutral right about there. I'm going to allow it to pronate. Allow it to pronate. Pronate, pronate, pronate. So, I'm pronating and I'm pulling it out to supination. Pronate, pulling out to supination. Now, do you see what's going on here? Do you think I can just isolate pronation and not get any other motion up the rest of the body? No. They work together. So as I pronate, I'm going to put my hand on my shin, and look what happens here. I'm pronating, and my tibia is literally rotating as well. Okay? Also, on top of that, as I pronate, look what's happening to my thigh. My thigh is also rolling and internally rotating. Okay? Which is a good thing. So, with each step you take, your foot pronates, your tibia internally rotates, your femur internally rotates. Okay, those are all transverse plane things. Another thing that happens, as I said before, is your foot will go through dorsiflexion, your knee will begin to flex, and your hip will subtly flex, and your pelvis will also tilt as well. And all these are there just to help decelerate the force of smacking into the ground, because however much you weigh, the ground pushes you back up with the same amount of force in the opposite direction. Okay, so recap, foot hits the ground, foot goes through pronation, which is a very complex thing that I'm not going to discuss. The tibia will internally rotate, the femur internally rotates. Another thing you can also see in this plane, what we call the frontal plane, is my leg will literally kind of roll inward a little bit. And you can see that if I take a step, my tibia will go in, and it makes it look like my knee goes in, and it does a little bit. Now, I've also heard people say that the knee shouldn't valgus. Well, the knee's going to valgus with every step you take and every move you make, okay? Especially if you're on funky terrain, okay? So if you're on a terrain that's angled or tilted or it's landing on a rock, your knee's going to do that. Now, do you want your knee to go crazy amounts into that with a lot of force downward? No. But shouldn't you be able to decelerate some? Shouldn't you be prepared for the worst? I would argue yes. So don't be afraid of your knees doing a little of this. In fact, we train this here. Okay, we don't put a lot of force to it. We also do this. Okay, again, what kind of joint is the knee? Is it a hinge joint? Not a pure hinge joint. It's a trochleogynemus, a pivotal hinge joint. So, I hope that cleared up some things. Your foot is designed to pronate. One of the most famous Renaissance people, Leonardo da Vinci, said something like, the foot is a masterpiece of engineering and a work of art. And I couldn't agree more. It's a beautiful thing. So allow that foot to pronate. Now, if you've been wearing shoes that have huge posts in the middle, or an orthotic wedge or something like that, and you want to go to more of a minimalist thing, go slow. This whole minimalist trend is good and bad. Barefoot, good and bad. You have to go slow. It's like I'm not going to go ahead and put a 500-pound bar in your back day one. That's going to take at least a week or two, right? No, just kidding. Okay, so if you have any questions, please shoot me an email. I'm here to help. And my name is Ryan Kreml, signing out.